official launch of payments in digital finance at the Singapore Fintech Festival. This is great to have all of you here with us today, joining from so many different countries. I am here physically in London, in the offices of CFT. The team at BIB is presenting from Budapest, and our speakers are joining from more than 10 countries, from Cambodia to the US, from Belgium to the UAE. I am Huy Nguyen Trieu, co-founder of CFT, and I will be today's master of ceremony. Today's event is all about the fastest growing sector of financial services, and that is payments and digital payments. Let me share with you just two numbers to illustrate the importance of payments today. It's 0 and 50%. 10 years ago, the top 10 largest financial institutions in the world were all banks. There was 0 payment companies. It's 0. Today, there are only 5 banks left. The 5 other companies are payment companies and platforms like Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Ant, and Tencent. This is 50%, from 0 to 50 in 10 years. And that's why the topic of today will be about payments, and the 2 hours will be really packed. First is the launch of the online specialization, Payments in Digital Finance, jointly developed by CFT and BIB. Then we'll have a fantastic panel composed of the National Bank of Cambodia, Libra, MasterCard, Standard Chartered, who will give their views on who is really transforming payments. Then we will have the awards for the future of payments, where we will announce the game changers in the category of company, regulator, and individuals. And finally, we will have a Q&A to make this section as interactive and engaging as possible. Depending on whether you are joining directly from the platform of Singapore Fintech Festival or the Zoom platform, you should be able to ask questions in the system. So please submit questions during the event, and our team will collect from the different systems, and our speakers will answer them at the end. Before moving on to the speakers, I would like to make a big thank you to the great institutions that have endorsed today's event. The Fintech Association of Hong Kong, the Fintech Alliance, the Banking Association for Central and Eastern Europe, Future Now, the Association of Serbian Banks, EFIS, My Conference, the Association of Vietnamese Scientists and Experts, Talk Portal, Rohanhill Digital, the British Embassy of Budapest, and Pantera Solutions. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Gergely Fabian, Executive Director at MNB, the Central Bank of Hungary, and CEO of the Budapest Institute of Banking. We will then have Traman Nguyen, co-founder of CFT and ambassador of the Singapore Fintech Festival. Up to you, Gergely.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Huy. Hello everyone, and welcome to the official launch of the Payments in Digital Finance specialization. My name is Gergely Fabian, and I have been running the Budapest Institute of Banking, BIB in short, since the establishment. BIB is the educational arm of the Magyar Nemzeti Bank, the Central Bank of Hungary, and the Budapest Stock Exchange. We are committed to help people upskilling in the financial sector and beyond. From traditional banking courses, such as risk management and compliance, to courses on digital finance and sustainability. Fun fact, actually the Payments in Digital Finance specialization was born during the Singapore Fintech Festival in 2019. Inspired by the festival, on a food court meeting with Traman and Huy, the founders of CFT, we decided to create it and launch this course on the 2020 edition of the Singapore Fintech Festival. Sadly, we couldn't travel to Singapore this year. I'm right now in Budapest. However, the bright side is that Budapest can present itself to the world of digital finance. Now, I will give the floor to Traman in London.
Thank you very much, Gagali, and welcome from London. On behalf of CFT, I'm delighted to welcome you to the launch of the Payments in Digital Finance at the Singapore Fintech Festival. Let me first introduce you to CFT. CFT was started 3 years ago in London and was initially designed for people like me. In other words, people in traditional finance with no knowledge of technology or who feel that they are missing on the revolution happening in the industry. Since then, we have grown into a global platform where we've trained tens of thousands of professionals, and today we are glad to be in Singapore, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, Luxembourg, and we are delighted to have a close relationship with Budapest Institute of Banking. And today is much more than just professionals in financial services, but also we are having on our platform fintech entrepreneurs, regulators, and even new graduates. The core of CFT is for the industry, by the industry, which is why all our courses are designed and taught by industry practitioners from the most innovative banks, fintech startups, regulators, or investors. It would be too long for me to list all our programs, from artificial intelligence to entrepreneurship with Revolut or Uber. And if you would like to know more, I would invite you to check and to go on our website, cft.education. Today, it's a very special day for many reasons. This is the 5th year in a row that CFT is associated with Singapore Fintech Festival. And the idea itself of CFT was born 4 years ago at the first SFF, thanks to the very inspirational messages of Ravi Menon and Sotmandu Mohanty. And as Gagali mentioned, this is also in Singapore. A year ago, that we discussed about how quickly payments were changing and that most people did not have a basic knowledge of how payments worked, let alone how they were evolving. And that's how this online specialization course started. And between the original idea and what it has become, I could say that it has exceeded our wildest expectations. As the team dived into the topics of payments, as the program directors talked with hundreds of experts around the world, we realized the breadth and the depth of this topic. And this is why, over the past few months, it became bigger and became a series of 6 courses with 30 experts and thousands hours of work. We will talk much more about payments today, and I will leave people much more qualified than me to discuss these topics. And I'm sure you will enjoy the session very much. And like me, you are also keen to discover who are the winners of the awards. Let me finish by hugely thanking Budapest Institute of Banking for their great partnership, the program directors for the incredible work the past few months, all the speakers for their amazing insights, all our partners for their support, and of course, all of you for being part of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gagali and Traman. The specialization was led by 2 program directors, Fabian van der Rijt and Gabor Dalnoki. Fabian is advisor of Abu Dhabi Global Market, and Gabor is head of service management at Gyro. They will be interviewed by Niha Roca, who's program manager on the specialization. We will have Fabian speaking from Belgium, Gabor from Hungary, and Niha from London. Up to you, Niha.
Thank you, Hui. And hello, everyone. It is lovely to be here at the event with you. And it is my pleasure to welcome both the program directors, Fabian and Gabor, to this virtual stage and hear from them. To begin with, Fabian, please can introduce yourself, followed by Gabor.
Hello, I'm Fabian van den Rijt. Senior Advisor at Abu Dhabi Global Market and Co-Program Director of the CFT Specialization Payments in Digital Finance.
Hello, my name is Gabor Dalnoki. I work at the Hungarian ACH Gyro, and I am also, along with Fabian, the co-program director of this fantastic new course, Payments in Digital Finance. Thank you for joining us today of the launch of this brand new group of courses.
Thank you very much. It's great to have both of you on board, and we'd like to hear more from both of you about how and why this course is relevant today and what is changing in the industry that has led to this. So my first question for you is, how and why is payments digitally transforming today? Fabian, if you'd like to go first.
Well, I think today we obviously live into an acceleration of everything that is digital because of the pandemic we're going through. But it's actually making things faster, but there's already a trend since some time in the adoption of digital payments, and there are many sources. I'm sure Gabor will add to that as well, but one of the sources, of course, the surge of e-commerce and the need for cheaper, faster, more integrated payments. There's also a lot of regulation that have been put in place in payment, leading to open banking, but also leading to instant payments. These are a few of those trends. Maybe Gabor can, of course, elaborate also on that in his role.
Yes, I agree. Nowadays, payments are undergoing an accelerating transformation and getting more and more complex at a speed that we have never seen before. And while payments are getting better by ever improving on its traditional metrics, the most important catalyst of this change is the digitalization of the economy of our lives. So when the advent of the smartphone in 2007 happened, this has fundamentally changed the expectations. It's always on, always connected, instant and everything. And that is also happening in our industry. And we are all familiar of this concept. So by now, the digitalization has touched almost every corner of the economy, and so that is the main accelerator to this process. And also the technology become cheaper, more efficient, and more accessible and standardized. So how can it happen that still the cash is in the dominant payment methods in all over the world? So we are working on changing that.
Yeah, and of course we saw lots of initiative, and we see lots of initiative in every country adopting instant payments in Europe, in Asia, and all over the place. We see also initiative at continent level, like in Asia and in Europe. And I think the next wave also that is happening is everything that is related to international payment, which today still remains, let's say, less automated and slower than what you can achieve in domestic markets. And we see a lot of regulations, a lot of proposals coming from different bodies to improve international payments.
Thank you. That was very interesting insights. And we heard a lot about, a lot of changes happening in the industry right now and a lot of developments to come in the near future. So as program directors of the specialization, could you share a few words about why it's important for all of us to learn about payments right now? And Fabienne, if you could share first.
Well, I think there's so many things happening, like we just said. And when we prepared the course with Gabor, we looked at all the different forms of payments, all the infrastructures, all the technologies, all the regulations. And we are both payments veterans, if I can use that word. And we were even overwhelmed by the quantity of new things that is happening every day and that you need to know. So we put ourselves in the shoes of people who either work in banks or in tech companies or regulators and are just interested to understand what's happening. You can't do that by just focusing on one aspect of payment. You have to have an overview of everything, because everything is kind of linked to each other, the technology, the business model, the regulation. And yeah, if you want to be part of it, you need to understand all that. That's why that course is so welcome.
Yes, and I truly believe that the payments is one of the least covered discipline in the formal education. So earlier, you typically learned payments by doing it, and therefore we have seen very well educated people in this business, but mainly in older age. But with the speed of this development, what we are just living, then we have to focus also on the new possible methods. And payments is probably one of the most important service what we use every day. It let us get on with our everyday life. And there is one aspect, and the other aspect is that we also have people who do not really want to make payments. They just want to get it happen. And in order to serve them, to help their wish to happen, to make it invisible, frictionless, and hassle-free, therefore we try to help not only finance people, but also corporate people to get along with the new possibilities in payments.
Thank you. And it would be great to hear from you about the specialization itself. So in just a few sentences, if you could share about why someone should take this specialization curated by CFT and PIP.
They can expect breadth and depth of the content. It covers a lot of things, and it covers them with appropriate depth. And it's also covered by people from the industry who actually work in payments every day. And I think that's what's making the difference.
Yeah, who starts to learn in this specialization, then they will be familiar the latest technologies applied in the payment industry, or the regulation landscape, and the fast-changing business models. And this can be a basis for a digital transformation, which is building upon the new developments in payment industry.
Thank you. I think that gives us all quite a good insight into why we should learn about payments right now. And just to finish off this discussion, would you have any last words to share with our audience? Gabor, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, so you never know what the future holds, but we definitely should aim to achieve more than what we think is possible. And we should definitely develop also the knowledge and the possibilities in payments. So after 13 years, the first iPhone was revealed. There's still a large gap between our expectations and what the payment industry delivers. You know, when we see what had happened in the telephony, that phone booths were along our high streets and now totally disappeared. We still have a very high number of ATMs operating and providing cash to people. So I think that payment industry will be succeeding when ATMs are also disappearing in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Fabian?
Well, yes, I mean, if you look at retail, wholesale is maybe different, but in retail, there's lots of talk about lifestyle banking, and lifestyle banking, of course, includes payment. It means that the payment is becoming part of your real life, of things you like to do and need to do. And the other word is ambient banking, and being a big fan of ambient music myself, one of the goals, of course, of ambient banking is that payment would be invisible, because they would be so ingrained in what you do that you wouldn't even see them. So whether we will see that and the disappearance of ATM, like Gabor is mentioning, it's a question mark, but we look forward to the evolution of payments, obviously.
Thank you very much, Fabian. Thank you, Gabor. I guess that with reasons like that, the question around digital payment is not really why you should learn about it, but much more about how to learn quickly and efficiently in this industry which is changing so rapidly. So with this in mind, I have the honor to introduce the senior lecturers of the specialization, who will tell you how they developed the course during the last 6 months. With you, we will have Jean-Michel Godefroy, President of JMG Consulting and former Director General of the European Central Bank. Fred Barr, Secretary General of the European Automated Clearinghouse Association. Kim Ford, Senior Vice President and Government Relations at Fiserv and former Executive Director of the US Faster Payment Council. Michael O'Loughlin, founder of O'Loughlin and former Managing Director at Token. And finally, Ritesh Jain, co-founder of Infinite and former COO at HSBC.
My name is Jean-Michel Godefroy. I have been Director General at the European Central Bank for 16 years, and now I am a consultant and mainly focusing on payments in developing countries. My course today will mostly deal with money. Chapter 1 will tell you about the creation of money and the fascinating history of money over the centuries. Chapter 5 will deal with new forms of money, such as Bitcoin, Libra, central bank digital currencies, perhaps the new steps in the history of money. And in between these two chapters, I will guide you among fascinating concepts, such as money creation, central bank money, the fairy tales around banknotes printing machines or helicopter money. Also, I will deal with cashless societies, financial inclusion, and the geopolitics of payments and many other things. I hope you will enjoy. Thank you.
I am Fred Beer. I've worked in payments, first in general management roles with profit and loss responsibility for payments provision services, where I led several new product launches. Then, as independent consultant to management teams, I help them understand and build roadmaps to navigate the challenges from technology, new user demands, new regulation in payments. I advise the demand side, meaning the end users of payments like corporates or e-commerce merchants, and the supply side, like banks and fintechs, and also regulators and not-for-profit organizations, like the World Bank. My main focus is Europe and Southeast Asia. Besides my consulting work, I serve as Secretary General of the European Automated Clearinghouse Association, and I teach a specialized payments course in the Netherlands, where I'm based. What is this course about? The course Payment Stack Fundamentals will lay the groundwork for your understanding of the digital payments industry. It will provide you with both a high-level overview as well as the more detailed concepts to understand the structure of the industry. And what the course will cover is first the various actors, the roles they play and how they interact. And then we will look at the spectrum of payment methods and standards and the role of common infrastructures like switching, clearing and settlement systems. Finally, we will discuss operations as well as the business models, explaining how the various players typically make money. So why is this important? The global payments industry is undergoing rapid change. While it is today predominantly operating at national or regional level and is regulated in national jurisdictions, digitalization is driving global standardization and global business consolidation. So whether you work on the supply side of payments with a bank, a PSP or a fintech, or whether you work on the demand side as a user with a corporate business or with an e-commerce merchant, it is important for you to understand these fundamentals and to understand how to leverage the digital payments ecosystems that are emerging so that you will be able to contribute and to provide leadership for your organization's success.
Hello, I'm Kim Ford, Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Fiserv. In that role, I manage and lead the company's political advocacy strategy around the world. Understanding the regulatory environment is important for all payments professionals. It can't really be confined only to the legal and compliance teams inside payments companies. For instance, when it comes to policies and practices such as anti-money laundering, proper risk management, or cybersecurity hygiene, regulators expect the C-suite, the board of directors, and management teams to share the responsibility and play a role. With that in mind, this course provides a baseline understanding of payments regulation in the European Union, United States, and Asia, highlighting critical laws applicable to electronic payment transactions, faster payments, cross-border transactions, interchange restrictions, financial crime compliance, data security and data privacy, and a look forward to how regulators are thinking about emerging payments such as digital and cryptocurrencies. You won't want to miss this exciting, comprehensive, and valuable course.
Hello, my name is Michael O'Loughlin and I'm the founder of an advisory firm called O'Loughlin.io. And we help banks, central banks and fintechs navigate the evolving world of payment technologies and regulations. Now, for the past 15 years, I've worked across the whole spectrum, central banking infrastructure to corporate and consumer channels. Now I'm working at the forefront of cutting edge technologies which are impacting global payments. So on this course, I'm a senior lecturer, so I'll be sharing my experience, strength and hope to learn how these new technologies are really impacting us and why it's important to learn more about this if indeed you are in the banking sector. In a world where we're increasingly connected online, trackable, traceable, freely sharing our data, it's only natural for customers' needs to change accordingly. And customers now demand this instant gratification, this personalized offerings. And these new technologies that we're going to talk about on this course offer exactly that. However, along with new customer expectations, the connected world, it also raises new types of risks, cybercrime, fraud, and identity theft, just to name a few. So, if we consider payments to be the lifeblood of banking, payment technologies could be thought of as the heart of the sector. And to have the latest technologies is really to ensure that the heart keeps on pumping. So what can new technologies do to tackle financial crime, fraud? How can technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning change the banking and financial sector? And how will the Internet of Things and payments combine to develop smart payments and evolve identity-based solutions? So these are just some of the questions we'll be answering on this course. If you're interested in learning really the foundations of banking and this interconnected world, I highly recommend you check out this course.
Hello everyone, I'm Vitesh Jain. I'm the co-founder of Infinite, a fintech, dehumanized credit, and the credit card industry in the UK. With 20 years experience in various sectors, the payments and digital space have a special place in my heart. Being an ardent technologist, I have had various roles, the most recent being a digital COO at HSBC, where I was building an enabling function for the bank of the future. One great opportunity I worked on was at Visa to lead the future of payments for Visa. With the introduction of Apple Pay in Europe, by delivering Visa Europe payment token service. With other experiences in payments within industries like payments, banking, and finance, I'm excited to announce that we at CFTE are launching an intensive course, Digital Payments in Finance, and I would be talking about payment strategies and business model innovations. In this course, I would be covering the payment business, who makes money in the payments ecosystem. I would also be covering data monetization, as we know that a significant amount of data and information is held by the payment companies. Last but not least, I would also be speaking about open banking, open finance, and its impact on financial inclusion. All of you within the payment industry and outside are trying to be on the top of the game, bettering ourselves, striving to become an industry subject matter expert. And here comes the introduction of this payments course. Because of its length, depth, as well as the global landscape coverage, I'm sure this course would make every learner a subject matter expert by the end of it. So come along everyone, let's get on with it. Thank you.
The course Digital Transformation is about the practical approaches and the tools, and offer some checklists to help you plan and execute a digital transformation in your own organization. And it will help you to leverage the emerging payments ecosystem around you. What will it cover? It will first cover a generic approach to digital transformation. Then it will show applied examples in payment-related transformations. Then we have two specific chapters. One is for e-commerce merchants and one is for corporate treasurers. And these two chapters each focus on the specific context for those organizations and will again include practical examples and best practice use cases. And why is this important? Again, whether you work on the supply side or whether you work on the demand side, and this specifically on the demand side as a user, it's really important for you to understand how to leverage these emerging digital payments ecosystems to contribute and to provide leadership for your organization's success.
Thank you to the senior lecturers for that introduction of the program. In addition to the 5 senior lecturers, 25 contributing experts are also part of the course. We couldn't, of course, invite all of them to attend today at the same time, but I will let you discover them on the video of the course. After that, Zeina Gohar, co-head of product at CFT, will explain to you how to enroll in the specialization if you wish to.
The last 5 years in the global payments industry have seen more innovation than the previous decades combined.
Let's say if you're working in a bank and you're coming into payments, it definitely helps to understand the basic concepts, to see how the structures work.
Other parts of the world will not reinvent money, but they may invent new ways to find good monetary solutions.
If we consider payments to be the lifeblood of banking, payment technologies could be thought of as the heart.
If you want to see innovation, go and look into payments.
Hello everyone, I am Zeina Gohar, the co-head of product at the Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. Following from what our program directors and senior lecturers have shared with you earlier today, I wanted to explain in more detail how our full specialization is structured. So the specialization consists of 6 courses that can be taken individually if you have a particular interest or need, or even all together. So each course consists of short and digestible lectures, expert interviews, case studies, selected readings, and assessment quizzes to help you track your progress. In total, 30 experts, including the senior lecturers, are actually featured on the course. It takes 4 to 5 full hours to complete one course and around 25 to 30 hours to complete the full specialization. It is completely online and you can even learn at your own pace. Upon completion of any of the courses, you will receive a certificate accredited by ACT and soon also by CPD. The courses are also under application for IBF accreditation in Singapore and ABS in Malaysia. Beyond the knowledge that you will gain, you will also benefit from joining a massive network of over tens of thousands of alumni all over the world. Individual courses are currently priced at 180 British pounds each, and the full specialization can be taken for £900. As we are celebrating our launch today, we currently have a 30% off early bird discount that you can benefit from, leaving each course at just £126 and the full specialization at £630 during the whole week of Singapore Fintech Festival. CFT and the Budapest Institute of Banking, or BIB, worked hand in hand to create this specialization in collaboration with our amazing suite of experts. We really hope you enjoy learning on our courses, and you can find more information using the link shared in the chat.
Thank you, Zeina. Payments have changed through history, from the barter system to the invention of money to credit cards and now cryptocurrencies. Innovation within payment has been present as long as the exchange of goods has existed as a concept. The fact that I am not with you in the same conference hall in Singapore also reminds us of the accelerated digitalization due to COVID, and this has applied equally to payments. So definitely a lot of innovation in payments, but who is really driving this innovation? Let me introduce you to the incredible lineup of panelists who will be offering their insights into this question. With us today, we have Saray Chia, Director General of the National Bank of Cambodia, Julien Legoc, Director of Policy at Libra, Kennedy Mubita, Managing Director at SC Ventures Africa, and Liz Oakes, Executive Vice President of MasterCard. Fabian van der Rijt will be moderating the panel. Over to you, Fabian.
It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce you to our dear panelists. I'll start with Saray Chia, and Saray is an Assistant Governor at the National Bank of Cambodia. She's the chairwoman of the Clearinghouse Operation Committee, and she has been leading the famous Bekong project, an acclaimed initiative of the National Bank of Cambodia that explore and introduce a new generation of payment system using blockchain technology. Under her leadership and guidance, innovative policy instruments were introduced to develop the interbank markets and promote the use of the local currency. Thank you, Saray, for being with us. Next is Julien Legoc. Julien is the Director of Policy for the Libra Association, a newly formed organization that has brought together social impact organizations as well as a diverse group of leading businesses from around the world to create a low-friction, high-trust payment system that empowers billions of people. In his current role, Julien is helping lead policy efforts to take shape and is in charge of stakeholder engagement for the Libra Association. Julien, thanks for being with us as well. Next, we have Kennedy Mubita. Kennedy is the Africa and Middle East lead of Standard Chartered Ventures, being the Standard Chartered Innovation, Ventures and Fintech Investment Unit. He runs the bank's Africa Accelerator Lab from Nairobi, and the lab is creating a platform to nurture strong intrapreneurial, extrapreneurial, and partnership culture in the Africa region, working closely with a range of stakeholders in our African markets to identify problems to solve and partner with fintechs, clients, and regulators to create value propositions that are relevant for the target markets. Kennedy, thank you again. Nice to see you again, and welcome to the panel. And then last but not least, Liz Oakes. Liz is the Executive Vice President, Strategy and Operation Excellence for Product and Innovation at MasterCard. In her role, Liz is in charge of developing MasterCard's long-term strategy for products and innovation to deliver the best secure end-user and customer experience around the world through co-innovation with clients, partnership and M&A. Liz, welcome to the panel. So today's panel is about who's driving innovation in payments today. And what is great about all the people, the panelists, is that they represent various stakeholders of the industry, game changers in the industry from different regions with different roles, which make this panel even more interesting. So let me kick off with the first question, if you're ready. So why are we all talking about payments, actually? Why is it hot news now when 10 years ago, or, it was a kind of specialist affair in the back office or in central bank, but nobody in the street was talking about payment. Now everybody's doing that. There's lots of innovation in payment. Why are we all talking about this? Isn't the payment as it was 5 years ago good enough? That would be my first question, and maybe Sari, you could start the panel on that one.
Thank you, Fabien, and good afternoon to everyone. To your questions, I think if you remember 10 years ago, well, about 18 years ago, what happened, which is the global financial crisis. And that's when a lot of the financial regulators and bankers realized that, and policymakers in general realized that financial inclusion is the way to go and bring the system to be more inclusive. And in promoting financial inclusions, it means you would have to have someone being able to access to basic financial services, and that's include a saving account, a credit account, insurance account, and payment account. And if you look at the first three that I mentioned, saving account, you need to have spare money to save. And if you talk about credit, you have to have the credit worthiness, you have to have an income. Insurance is also a very complicated product. So these required prerequisite for a person to be able to access. But payment, on the other hand, anyone do make payment on a daily basis. And that's probably the easiest channel to promote financial inclusion. And if you talk about formal payment services, it is even better. And that's when we realize that if you can bring somebody into a formal payment service or use formal payment service provider, then not only you allow this person to make payment formally, but you also capture a lot of information about that person that would eventually help this person access to a credit, for instance, because it will show your payment behavior, it will show your cash flow, etc. So it's a very important element that we haven't really looked at previously, but now with technology, it's become very essential.
Thank you, Sheree. Maybe Julien, you can elaborate and share your perspective on that same topic.
Sure, thank you, Fabien. And to build on the excellent foundation Suri just discussed, the sentiment that we're feeling today, we felt in the past. We transitioned from mostly cash to checks, to the ability to write checks, then to the ability to use a charge card, then a credit card. And this was 50, 60 years ago. The acceleration of payments discussion, one, has been from this pandemic that we've been going through the past 9-10 months. But I truly believe we've had innovation in the telecom space, for example. We've had innovation in communication space. We've had innovation in with the internet, being able to send one another messages. But the payments world has really been fundamentally the same for the past 50, 60 years. Sending money around the globe still takes several business days. The weekends are, of course, closed. Therefore, you have to add that to the equation when you send money. And really, I think we're coming to a world where consumers want optionality. Consumers may want to use a lower friction, a payment device such as a mobile phone might be more convenient than carrying around a lot of cash. In fact, it might even be more secure. So I think this sentiment that we're feeling today is really evolution of the payments world that's been accelerated by, one, the development of newer technologies such as blockchain, and two, consumers wanting one more option to be able to make not only a national payment, but international payments that carry less friction than they have in the past, Fabien.
Thank you, Julian. And Kennedy, maybe your perspective from where you stand in Africa, and also from your innovation and Stand Chart perspective.
Thank you very much for participating in this forum. And I think just to add to what my colleagues have mentioned, and maybe just a slightly different take, my short answer would be a limitation of capability. I mean, prior to the ICT age, which is very, very digital, the structure in which society used to operate from a commercial perspective was where value is kept in one place, which is banks, and with certain protocols to obtain that value, and contracting was separate. So the two events needed could not happen simultaneously. And that was taken as a given in society. So what would happen is that players in society would go out and contract to do certain jobs or acquire certain products or deliver certain services. And after finishing the contracting, would then have to go through to their banker who keeps their value and go through a bureaucratic process, which is necessary for security purposes, to then request them to transfer value to the counterpart. So the separation of value and contracting didn't make payments a discussion point. It was separate from the business activity. With the development of information communication and technology protocols from the late 90s into the early 200s and up to this date, we're beginning to see these two issues merge, and therefore commerce starts taking place faster. And the velocity of commerce and exchange is taking place at such a high speed that now you cannot afford to separate your value from your contracting. And once that recognition was made possible by technology, that increased the requirement of economic players and transactors to say, I want immediacy in my contracting and value exchange. And now that becomes a race as to who can remove all the friction that is needed to make these two events happen simultaneously. And the winner of that battle is going to be people who can actually mesh them so tightly that the payment side becomes invisible. And so that is the holy grail of payments, and we are all moving towards that space. That is my take with regard to why it's now topical and before it wasn't.
Thank you, Kennedy. And Liz, on that same question, of course, MasterCard is core and central in payment infrastructure and innovation. What's your take on payment being the new black or the new orange, depending in the industry?
Interestingly, I think I feel like payments has always been an exciting place to be, but just because there's been so much going on in the last 20 years, quite frankly. When you reference 5 or 10 years, I think back, we've had faster payments in places like South Korea, in the UK. It's part of how we operate for many, many years, since 2008. So when I took the context of the 5-year horizon that you mentioned, I think the thing that really stands out for me is customer demand, customer experience. So what is it that people are trying to do? And what's really shifted for me in the last 5 to 10 years is the digital economy. So not just, we look at digital payments, but everyone's now using Spotify. Our kids have grown up with mobile phones. So, when faster payments was first designed, it was prior to the invention of the iPhone. And what we really have seen since then is the introduction of mobile banking, the introduction, as Sari really pointed out, financial inclusion as a huge focus, because you can actually deliver to consumers the type of relationship management or the type of engagement that previously required people to do that. And it was a very expensive proposition. So now we have digital distribution, we have digital manufacturing of products and services that we never saw before. And when people want to consume on demand in the economy, they need to pay quite often on demand. And that experience for me is wrapped up in a host of issues that are probably the things that we look for in a good payment system. So you want to see certainty. The customer wants to know that their money is going to get there if you're telling them that it goes fast. Convenience is now, it's not even a question. If it's not easy to use, people will ditch the app from their phone, or they just won't go back to that bank. They'll find somebody else, or they'll find another provider, or they'll find a mobile provider. In terms of access, I think the economy has changed quite dramatically. Our viewpoint has shifted from a kind of controls and assurance risk-based framework to a pre-funded model where everybody can participate. And that has really expanded the economy. It's expanding both inclusion, but also access for new fintech players. So there's quite a lot going on there. And then it comes down to speed and resilience. So people are looking for that instantaneous answer and something that's going to still be there tomorrow. And I think in the middle of all of that, it's digital by design. It's increasingly moving to remote. So, you know, what does that look like for us in terms of contactless? The experience is very different to what it was even 3 or 4 years ago. And I think in the middle of all of that, then, you know, why would somebody participate in any of these systems or any of the infrastructures that we talk about? It's trust. So at the end of the day, is this going to work? Can I reach the person on the other side? Do I know that my money is safe? And so I think even with all of the tech changes that we introduce and all of the newfangled things that we come up with, that is still at the heart of what people want to engage with. So figuring out models for us that actually still maintain all of those items is quite hard, because it's easy to play with the technology. It's quite difficult to play with the banking.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you all for this first round. So I think we set the scene of payments innovation, and thank you for all your views, which are very complementary or slightly different, which is great. And obviously the pandemic we're going through is accelerating that change even more and doing things in months that would have taken years maybe before that. Let's get concrete now. I think what I'm going to ask you next, and I'll start with you, Suri, is you all do innovation in your daily job. That's your responsibilities in what you do. And when we prepared the course with the CFTE team, it was super hard to select, you know, what are the best practice innovation? What are the things that are game changing the industry? What are the innovation that open up new avenues of growth or inclusion? But I'm going to ask you, from where you stand, Suri, and I'll ask the same to the others, what are the 2-3 innovation projects that you've been either leading or seen that for you stand as best practice going forward?
I think the first innovation would have to be the regulator mindset. That is really important, because if you don't have an open mindset, then you tend to see everything as too much risk to take and to try. So that is the most important things that need to happen. The second, what I've seen is all the digital payment that is happening, how fast, how easy for people to transact. Because, I mean, as an economist, when you talk about the economy or trade, at the end of the day, there's always payment and settlement that is happening. So exactly to what Liz mentioned, you need to make it efficient and follow what is happening around the world. So particularly during this year, the contactless is becoming very convenient, and online banking is become the new model. What I also personally find interesting and have been part to the development is the peer-to-peer project. When we were exploring the interoperability among the different players in the country, we had the option to either select the conventional system or something else that is the DLT, which allow peer-to-peer. And so we chose the peer-to-peer, and it's helped us in many ways, because if you look at how banks are connected together to make interbank clearing, basically you have a settlement account at the central bank. Everyone open a bank account at the central bank. There's a settlement account. Everyone have to have a credit line with the bank to settle in case somebody is short of liquidity, etc. And I say this because we don't have an RTGS system. That's why banks need to hold a certain amount with the central bank. So if you look at it that way, when we have the e-wallet provider, the technology provider, and you want to integrate them into the same system, you have to bring them into the national clearinghouse. And that means they would have to comply with the liquidity management, the same ways as we would require a bank to comply with. And that beats the whole purpose of regulating them as a technology provider in the first place, because then the regulatory burden put on them will eventually pass on to the customer. So when we explore this possibility, the DLT, I'm not sure whether it's blockchain or technology are interchangeable in terms of term, but we explore this technology that allow peer-to-peer, and this is when we were able to connect the payment service provider that serve mostly people with low income rural area with the banks who serve mostly people in the urban area. So bridging the urban and rural together, and also eliminate that part where the payment service provider need to open a settlement account with the central bank. So their customer can just transact as long as they have the money into the wallet. So that's one. The other that we're trying to explore on a cross-border basis, because as Cambodia, we send a lot of migrant workers overseas. And so when we're trying to see how we can help our migrant worker remit money back. So usually when you remit money back, I mean, you all know it's cost somewhere between 20 to 30% in commissions and fees, etc. And so if, let's say, a migrant workers that earn $100 a month, sending money back, they will have to pay $30 out of that 100. And they usually do it in a bulk transfer. So once every month, send it to somebody at home who would then manage it on their behalf, meaning paying for the school fee, electricity fees, etc. And so from a women empowerment perspective, if a women worker send money to the husband or the mothers or the mother-in-law, and the money get to spend somewhere else than the children educations or the household welfare, then it could be really disappointing. And this is from my personal experience. And so we want to allow these women migrant workers to be able to do transfer any time of the day free of charge, directly to the school or directly to the hospital or directly to whoever back in the country, without having to worry whether her money that she worked hard to earn is well managed or not. So I think the biggest innovation, the peer-to-peer is really going to be something big in the region. It's developing. Hopefully we can explore that further with our neighboring countries. We tried this with Malaysia, we're exploring it with Thailand. So let's see where it will land. But yeah, that's for me, three main innovation: regulators, electronic payment, and the P2P.
Thank you, Shuri, and impressive development, obviously. And thank you for your clear explanation of the social benefits also of those innovation. Julien, maybe same question to you.
Sure, Fabian. So I would see remarkable innovation in people and in technology. What we've seen now over the past year and a half, we went from 5 central banks looking at central bank digital currencies to now more than 70% of the world's central banks looking at the benefits and the risks of going into the payments world with digital currencies. We've also seen regulators that have really leaned forward in a lot of the new technologies that are coming out with payments. Now on the technology front, I think the remarkable innovation is the interoperability. Imagine a world, Fabian, where I am a Gmail account holder and you are a Yahoo account holder, and I send you an email, and that email takes 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and I have to pay based on how quickly you want to see my message. That's the current world of technology that we live in, which is the financial services world is siloed. And Suri had an example of remittances and how much it costs. And she's absolutely right. Some of the corridors are as high as 20, 30, 40%. According to the World Bank, the latest figures is on average, the world pays just about 6.8%. But over the past decade, we fluctuated on that average between 9% and 7%. Therefore, there's a need for innovation from a technology perspective and also from a people perspective. Now, the benefit of all of this is that you now have regulators that are deciding to regulate projects such as our project through a regulatory college. I think what is innovative there is the Swiss have essentially reached out to the world and said, we would like to convene a consensus-based approach to regulating a payment system like ours. And they've brought over 20 authorities and regulators around the world to take a look at the project. So it is absolutely encouraging to see that we have the people as well as the technology coming together to really benefit the consumer into choosing what payments they decide to utilize for their day-to-day as well as for their remittance needs.
Thank you, Julien. Kennedy, I mean, we already spoke before during the recording of the course itself, and of course, you will be featured in that course when launched. So we already had an interesting discussion about innovation then, but maybe your perspective on what you see in Africa and in Stand Chart as well.
Yeah, we're exploring various paths. We invested in some payment companies, and I can mention that Assembly Payments out of Australia is actually already running as a platform that looks to scale. But in terms of prospectively, we're looking at 3 key channels, and I'll try not to take up too much time because it's a panel session. The first one is where we are creating B2B platforms globally. Where we onboard. So basically we do what the banks do, but this as an outside player from an SC Ventures perspective. We're creating platforms that will enable real-time instantaneous settlement between parties combined with a marketplace where they exchange the goods. And we are also looking at cross-border settlements between countries. In short, if you're going to conceptualize it from a theoretical perspective, we're trying to tokenize value so that the money and information goes together. And we're really looking at blurring the difference between cash management and trade and bills of exchange. Because if you've got a standard SWIFT payment right now, you have 2 fields which you are free for your use, like field 71, field 72. You know, we can use that for anything else. But when you're doing a payment, all you have is a beneficiary, their account, their address, and so forth. And that creates a lot of friction as to purpose of payment and makes it difficult to execute seamlessly. When you're doing a trade transaction, it's a payment commitment based on conditions. And once those conditions are met, that's when the payment is released. We believe that these 2 separations between cash management and trade is really a capacity issue. And as we begin to provide informed payments or cash management payments, they will start looking like LCs. And then as we start digitizing the conditions through smart contracts on letters of credit, they'll start looking like cash payments because then they'll self-execute. So we're actually looking at that. We have an ongoing project with one third party that we want to be able to remit money from Africa into China, for instance, seamlessly, instantaneous. And then resolve the cost problem of working through correspondent banks who, whenever you process through their ledgers, you know, they have to take a slice because they have to have an administrative process around that. So if we digitize and put smart contracts around the processes that are needed to validate a payment that's going through you from a third party and increase point-to-point payments, we reduce the cost. And therefore, the bank's major role will only be to provide maybe international liquidity and to provide much finer FX rates because we have access to more markets and therefore can get this value quicker. We believe that these 3 projects are going to converge over the next 5 to 10 years. And it will become very difficult to know whether is this payment a cash management payment because it will have details about what it is that you are buying. Or is this an LC because really it will self-execute and will be immediate like an LC. So that's just one of the projects that we're looking at. I'm quite excited about what it's going to do and might be transformational for the industry.
Thank you, Kennedy. And Liz, on your side, what are the best practice innovation you do or see around?
Yes, there's so many things going on. It's kind of hard to pinpoint, you know, what is it that's going to really make a difference. But I probably would go back to what Sari said earlier about financial inclusion. For us, you know, one of the mantras within MasterCard is doing well by doing good. You know, how do we actually get more people into the economy? How do we grow the pie for everybody? And so in order to achieve those kind of objectives, and we've seen in the pandemic, which you referenced earlier, Fabienne, what is really important for a lot of people at the moment is, how do I get paid? So how do I make a living? How do I grow my business? How do I survive in the current environment? And so for me, actually, with that context in mind, mobile acceptance as a construct and as a concept, regardless of kind of who's doing it and how they're doing it, it is, I think, a game changer. So that idea that small businesses and individuals can actually grow their business and get paid without all that friction, without all the complexity, simply by giving their email or their phone number or whatever the proxy is that they want to use in their country. I think that is, for me, the most powerful dynamic that we can actually look to. But I would add one other thing. I think for me, then, the longer term dynamic, what's really going to make a difference is digital identity. I do believe that a lot of the friction that we encounter across the payments industry, most generally, is because you're trying to identify the counterparty that you're actually trading or transacting with. And the bank is trying to identify who they really are. And we have all this KYC, AML, sanctions checking. We have so many controls and assurance models and processes in place because of the regulatory burden around identifying who people are. And so digital identity, whether it's associated with the individual or the corporate or their role or the access provisions, entitlements, etc., is, I think, the key to unlocking electronic payments, full stop. It will enable all of us to transact safely and securely with whoever we're trying to transact with. So that, for me, trumps everything.
Thank you, Liz. And I'll stay with you for the next question, because thank you for all your exchanges of views on the innovation you've done, you've seen. You touched upon international innovation also, but I'll stay on international for a while. We see, of course, automation islands and innovation islands throughout the world. But I think the biggest challenge ahead is, how do we do that at international scale? There's been reports from FSB, CPMI recently talking about challenges and roadmap and so forth. While preparing this panel, we being two market infrastructure girl and boy respectively, we talked about the role of market infrastructure, but what does need to happen at the international level? How can we improve the international payment landscape? I think Julien talked about interoperability, but what's your view on what remains to be done?
Yeah, and Julian is right. Interoperability is a massive challenge. But partly, the technology is not the issue. I'd say that, I know that's a sweeping statement to make, but the technology really isn't the issue. We've managed to send emails to each other, and we figured out how to use blockchain. The issue for me is much more around the regulatory environment, the burdens, as I described with digital identity, around identifying counterparties, all of the processes that we have put in place around what is an accounting and ledger-based construct. So moving money from one place to another. It's all very well for me to agree with you, even over this phone call or this medium, that I owe you money, but that's not very valuable to you. You need the actual funds. So the settlement is the critical question. So connecting settlement across jurisdictions has been complex and burdensome. We have time zone issues, we have RTGS opening hours, we have, how do you actually move the money from one country and currency to another country and currency? So that cross-border foreign exchange settlement risks, all the things that we are very familiar with in the wholesale market. 20 years ago or longer, actually, CLS was set up to address some of these risks in the wholesale market for FX. So I'm delighted, actually, that the FSB and the CPMI are starting to now articulate and focus on the things that we've all known for a long time need to be fixed. So we need common standards around regulatory burdens, or whether it's AML, sanctions screening. Get the regulators, get the central banks to actually talk to each other and come up with an answer that is consistent and a framework that we can all understand. Because actually we're creating, with the pandemic and everything else, we're creating more silos. Each country is going to go off and fix its own problems, or try to, and really focus on its own population. And I'm delighted, actually, that the Singapore Fintech Festival is bringing together again all those central banks and from remote jurisdictions, and everybody's connecting to keep talking to each other, because if we have to fix this together. And so for me, the cross-border challenge is really looking beyond that. How do I fix my domestic payment transactions? And to consider that in time again, we will have tourism. We'll all be moving around again. And if you can't actually pay for something in another jurisdiction as easily and seamlessly as you can in the jurisdiction that you're physically in, whether it's remote or ideally, hopefully, when we all get to travel in person, then what's the point in fixing the domestic piece? Because it's not going to achieve your overall objective. If I look at that right now, the introduction of, QR codes in Mexico or China that are proprietary or that don't connect to everyone else's systems means that as a consumer, I can go to Mexico on holiday, but I can't buy a Coke. So, that to me is just a really basic fundamental question. And I think Julian kind of referenced earlier, we want to empower people to be able to use the technology that they have in their hand and to be able to participate. And I know that quite often central bankers and regulators at that cross-border level are very far removed from that and from those questions. But I think we have to all consider that we are each independently consumers as well as trying to figure out the answers to these big theoretical questions.
Thank you, Liz. Kennedy, you already touched upon international matters in your previous intervention, but what's your take on the level of collaboration that you see internationally and how that should intensify?
I think there is a will. I mean, the market seems to be accepting of new digital tools, which I believe are much better than what existed before. For instance, the digital identity now can be validated through APIs with data sources that kept by trusted entities like government. But my concern in that area is that I referenced to this in an article I wrote for one of the business magazine, is that 70% of business leaders are said to be concerned about technology. Now, that was presented as something good. I actually looked at it another way and said, if 70% of the people are worried that we have better tools to manage our financial risk, then that's not the right thing. Because if you look at any other industry, if in the wood cutting industry, if somebody says, I've got a better saw to cut your trees, or I've got a better transportation system to take your wood from wherever you cut it to wherever it is, maybe that's not a very good thing, a good example in this era when we should be worried about environmental restoration. But in any industry, normally when you have better tools to manage the risks that you face, that should be welcome. So for me, that indicated that the 70% of industry leaders are not ready to adopt digital technology because one, maybe they don't understand it, or two, because they are afraid of the switching costs. And in a sense, new digital tools indicate that there are new ways of resolving or making settlements, if we're talking about payment, which I have not yet immunized from a control, sanctions, and regulatory perspective, and therefore I have to do this all over again. So I think the issue of switching cost, upskilling, infrastructure costs that my previous contributor talked about, standardization of cryptography, because we have to use some form of cryptography. It could be DLT, it could be something else. I normally don't like talking about DLT as a solution because it's really just a tool. And somebody might come up with a new way of cryptography, and we need to understand that as well, particularly with 5G coming. So I don't think there's enough collaboration because the industry, from a statistical basis, 70% of them are not ready. And the harmonization that needs to take place in terms of putting up common standards to make all the closed loop systems interoperable will need investment and will need motivation and will need some evangelists to pull through.
Thank you, Kennedy. And this discussion we had before about closed loop and open loop is an interesting one, which we can elaborate another day. But I think what we see today is a lot of closed loops being digitized. And to the point of the previous speaker, it's how can we open up those loops or connect them to make everybody else benefit from the change. Julien, I think your reason for being is international collaboration. So what's your take on that?
That's correct, Fabian. And it's tough going after Liz and Kennedy, such good points. And I feel like Liz is just in my brain. So I'm going to try to add a little bit to the discussion here. But one, I think I completely agree with Liz that technology, and all deference to my technology friends, is not the issue here. People, I think, and Kennedy touched on that, and regulators moving forward. However, let's look at what the facts are today. The facts are central banks, some of them already have pilot programs for digital currencies. Some have been playing around in sandboxes for many years. The Singapore Fintech Festival is a great way to bring everybody together. FATF had new guidance on digital payments and currencies last year. The G20 talks about it. The FSB talks about it. The European Commission talks about it. They have regulation with MiCA that's been proposed. So the good news is there is forward and good momentum in the particular space. The real challenge from the people perspective, and Kennedy touched on it as well as Liz, is how do we get the world bodies to talk to one another in a similar language? And that's where I feel technology and of course policy should go hand in hand. The interoperability challenge that we have and being able to develop a project that is open source, I think solves that to a point. The discussion remains, what do we do in one country versus what do we do in another country? And that brings it 100% back to the eKYC discussion that I believe, Liz, you brought up, that is kind of foundational to be able to talk to one another. If you know the individual that is sending money, you know the individual that is receiving money, if you're a government, does that satisfy whatever technology they use? I think the answer should be yes. And I think if we can get the eKYC, that is, or digital identity across the world approved, I think we'll go very far. And the last point I'll make, you may have been aware of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so in just 10 years now, they have very specific quant-based and qualitative-based goals. One of them is around remittances. And so remittance markets, we've talked a little bit about it. They essentially want to bring the average from a 7% to a 3%. Unless you have large-scale innovation, you're not going to get to that 3%. It's been stubbornly high now for over a decade. Surrey talked about, the 20-30% in certain corridors. And here's really where you need competition. And in order to have competition, you have to have clear regulation. And if you have clear regulation, you have to have entrepreneurs that are willing to build particular digital transformation type wallets. And we feel like with an open source, open code, it is the easiest way to get on these international rails. Fabian.
Thanks, Julien. Suri, I think you are part of lots of international discussion with the various roles that you have. And based on what you're achieving in Cambodia, what's your view? And I know you're already collaborating with neighbors in Malaysia and others, but what's your view on that international collaboration aspect?
I agree 100% with whatever Liz mentioned, so I don't even have to add anything. But just to give some example of collaborations, but back to what Liz mentioned, I think technology again is not an issue, but the customer KYC, because when you talk about digital, you talk about faceless people. This is really a big issue. In different countries at different stage of development in terms of the digital ID. Within the ASEAN region, Singapore may have one of the most sophisticated digital ID in the world. And then you've got countries like Cambodia, who is struggling to get something up. So if you're talking about, quick and easy cross-border between the two countries, will have to work. Cambodia will have to work a lot on our digital ID. But back to the example that I wanted to mention between Cambodia and Thailand, where we have this cross-border QR payment, where a Cambodian tourist going to Thailand can use its domestic bank mobile applications and pay to any QR code merchant in Thailand and vice versa. And a lot of it has to do with discussions and dialogue between the two central banks and the private sector. And that's very important for the private sector to understand what are the concerns from the central bank's perspective. So we lay out our concerns, It's also important for the regulators to listen to the private sector about their concerns as well. So mostly it's to do with what is the bottom line, what do I get from doing this? So trying to understand each other, and it could happen within, actually our project took about a year to happen, and it wasn't really about technologies or anything. It's really about dialogue between the private sectors and the regulators. So yeah, come back to, I think Julien mentioned as well, is regulators need to sit together and talk what we want, what are our concern, and at the same time talk with the private sector and lay out clearly the expectations.
Thank you very much. I think time flies, so we're well ahead in our panel. So I put myself in the shoes of the people attending this panel. They see so many discussion, interesting points, but I'll stay with you, Sari, for the next question, and let's try and do that quickly to stick with the time. But the people that look at this panel, working in financial institution, working in other institution, or being students, or so many things changing. How do you see people should stay abreast of all those innovations? How can people upskill, reskill themselves, or at least know what's happening? Because things move so fast.
How? I think a lot of readings and attending this event like I'm doing right now. I'm still learning. There is so much going on. I think we're in the event organized by CFC. So I think that's also a good place to get something out of it. You've got fantastic expert panel. But there is so much going on, and I think it's just to keep readings and asking questions. From a regulator perspective, I think what we need to keep ourselves abreast with is the risks that come with all these innovations, and that is something that we can't learn enough, and there's always something new happening. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll ask the others the same question briefly. Maybe Julien, what's your view on that?
Thank you, Fabien. Certainly, education and enthusiasm in the space drives curiosity. And so the benefit of being a hot topic is you open up any type of journal or your computer and you're going to see something going on in this particular space with innovation. But the drawback is there's so much going on that it's accelerating very, very quickly. So I think education is still key. And just remind yourself that if you've been in the space for just about 6 months, it equates to about 10 years in any other industry. So you will get very, very smart very, very quickly, again, through courses, through periodicals, and even the news. But don't let that discourage any of our attendees. We don't know it all, certainly, but take a specialization. My recommendation would be, if you care about remittances, then dive down into the current technologies or the duopoly of folks that are playing in the particular space, and then get an expertise on that.
Thank you. Kennedy, same question?
I would say that it's not even a question of how or if, but it's a matter of survival. I like anecdotes about just imagine how the people were feeling who were building horse carts for transportation, and the motor engine was invented. I mean, you didn't have a choice anymore. If you're going to transport your goods, you'd have to move to motorized transportation or the railway line. You couldn't go back to walking and horse riding and donkey riding. So we're at that point in history as well, where there are new methods of addressing the risks that we met. So I would suggest a risk-based approach, because whatever you're doing, you're probably using a traditional method if you haven't yet converted to a digital or technology-driven solution. And then think of how you can do that same service in a digital fashion, and taking advantage of the new tools available to do your current work. Because the risks don't change. I mean, it's the risk of fraud. It's the risk of person ID takeover on a platform, the risk of AML, dealing with money launderers, or dealing with a country that's sanctioned and so forth. So all those risks are the same. What technology provides you with a tool to do them in the same way, so whether you are growing whether you're a farmer, there's IT, there's agri-tech solutions coming through, so you better appraise yourself in those. If you're a banker, there's banking risks of AML, fraud, operational risks are there. You need to see how is this new technology impacting these, and that makes that'll make you future ready, because the disruption is not only in processes and systems, it's in people, and you've got to make sure that you're not disrupted.
Thank you, Kennedy. And Liz, on education, what would be your advice to the people attending this panel?
So Julian has made me feel very old now after 25 years in this industry. That I must have dog years. It's quite a scary concept. I'm going to calculate that later, Julian. But I think in honesty, I separated into probably two things in the same way, or maybe the three things that the CFTE has separated. So there's technology, and then there's finance. I park entrepreneurship because I kind of think that that's something that's really difficult to teach. But I think if I break that down into the finance side of things, I find a lot of technologists who are fantastic at the technology, but they really fundamentally don't understand banking. And so I think having a basic grasp of counterparty credit risk, the basic tenets of consumer protection, whether it's fraud, all the different things that we've discussed today. I think those fundamentals, even if you start just with the jurisdiction that you sit in and understand what those frameworks look like and what good looks like, I think that's a really good starting point. Because quite often when you come up with, you're confronted with technology innovation, a lot of it is cheaper, faster, easier, because it simply is absent all those controls and principles that are actually required to make something work. So that's kind of the first thing I look for is, is this a shortcut because it's fantastically innovative but great, or is it a shortcut because it's fantastically innovative but actually illegal or dangerous? And on the tech side, I honestly don't know how you stay on top of it. It's a fast-moving, really fast-moving environment. For me, I pick the things that I think are really going to make a difference. There's a lot of noise out there. So in my role, I kind of choose the maybe 2 or 3 really tangible, groundbreaking technologies that are probably going to make a massive difference, and really follow those in great detail. And the vast majority of the rest of it, you can keep an eye on it. You need to be aware of it, but it's probably not going to change your own personal life. And then I think in this age of misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, and everything else, just trying to navigate credible sources that you can actually learn something from, rather than buying somebody else's marketing message or being conned into something which is probably not really beneficial to society. So that's kind of, I guess there's a short-term piece there and there's a long-term piece. But it is a huge challenge. So I agree probably with Sari's comments earlier on. It's great to be able to do something like this, where you can not only read something, but you can be immersed in it. You can find who are the experts, reach out to those people, actually get involved in the industry, find out what's going on, and find something that you can get involved in beyond your day job. And I think that's, for most of us, how we ended up in the many interesting places we're all in.
Thank you, everyone. And indeed, I think this specialization from CFTE is for the industry, by the industry. It's lots of breadth and lots of depth as well. It's quite modular, so I'm sure it will provide some answers to the many questions we raised through the panel. So we've come to the end of this Who is Driving Innovation Payments Today panel. I wanted to thank you for participating. Of course, thank you, Sari, Julien, Kennedy, and Liz, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci, Fabien. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Merci.
I think you will agree with me that it was a hugely insightful panel, so thanks a lot to all our panelists. And now, on to the next part, which I know a lot of you have been waiting for, which is the awards of Future of Payments, and who are the winners. So to announce the winners, let me introduce you to Kata Pal, Head of International Business Development and Innovation at Budapest Institute of Banking. Up to you, Kata.
As we have seen today from our exceptional speakers, the global digital transformation of finance is fostering new trends in the payments world, and the current pandemic situation has been a catalyst for many of these changes. When we developed the Payment in Digital Finance course, we analyzed several players of this industry and realized that there were amazing companies, regulators, and individuals making a huge impact around the world. This is the reason why CFT and BIB have decided to run the Future of Payments Awards, to get input from you, from the global communities, on those who were the real innovators and game changers in the world of payments. 1,000 of you have voted from all over the world, and we have selected the winners in 3 categories. The company that is changing the game in payments, the regulator that is changing the game in payments, and the individual who is changing the game in payments. Without further ado, let me invite Gergely Fábián, the Executive Director of the MNB, the Central Bank of Hungary, and the CEO of the Budapest Institute of Banking, to present the first award for the game-changing company.
There have been a lot of submissions for the company that is game-changing payments. 2 companies have emerged with the most number of votes, and these companies are: the first is Ant Group. Congratulations to Ant. With more than 1 billion users and services such as the Alipay, Ant is definitely making a huge impact on payments. The co-winner of the competition is Infinite. Infinite is a payment startup that has just launched. And despite being so new, it received a lot of support in the votes. That goes to show how vibrant is the payment ecosystem is. Congratulations to Infinite.
Absolutely thrilled and overwhelmed to be here today and to be sharing this with the Ant Group, who more than anything else we look up to and hope to have the same sort of impact on this industry as they have had over the years. Also supremely humbled by the love and appreciation that our users have showered upon us on a small fledgling startup that hasn't even launched yet. We have a very simple goal at Infinite. We want to help our users make the most of their credit cards.
The total credit card debt in the UK stands at 72 billion, and we plan to change it and significantly dent it. The UK payday loans stands at 2 billion. We plan to make it irrelevant. We are a small but extremely driven group of individuals who want to solve the most fundamental yet the prevalent of financial problems.
Let me invite Trem Nguyen, the co-founder of CFTE and the ambassador of the Singapore Fintech Festival, to announce the winner of the game-changing regulator in payments.
Thank you very much, Kata. There have been also a lot of submissions for most innovative regulator from everywhere around the world, Europe, to Africa, to Asia, and the US. The regulator that received the most vote was the FCA, the UK regulator, with the UK being at the forefront of regulations such as open banking. This is definitely very well deserved, so congratulations to the FCA.
Now, let me invite Gergely Fábián, the Executive Director of MNB, the Central Bank of Hungary, and the CEO of the Budapest Institute of Banking, to present the award for the game-changing individual.
You all voted for incredible leaders in the transformation of the payment industry. Nevertheless, the winning individual that is changing the game in payments is Saray Chia. Congratulations! Her Excellency Saray Chia is an assistant governor at the National Bank of Cambodia. As a chairwoman of Clearinghouse Operation Committee, she has been leading the Background Project, an acclaimed initiative of the National Bank of Cambodia, exploring and introducing a new generation of payment system using blockchain technology. Under her guidance, innovative policy instruments were introduced to develop interbank markets and promote the use of local currency.
Hello, thank you for the award. It is really an honor. I would like to thank those of you who voted for me. Especially, I would like to thank my incredible team at the National Bank of Cambodia, without whom my ideas would remain ideas. I would also like to send a message to the girls and the women from small and developing countries like mine, that anything is possible when you set your heart to, and that you can still disrupt the world regardless your gender and where you're coming from. So once again, thank you, and it's really an honor.
Let me invite Trem N. Nguyen, co-founder of CFT and the ambassador of the Singapore Fintech Festival, to announce the charity aspects of this amazing award. Thank you very much.
This year's Singapore Fintech Festival has a beautiful main theme: people and talent. I believe that in the midst of the current digital transformation of the industry, people need to remain at the center. However, not everyone is as fortunate as many of us present here today. And the current global situation is unfortunately affecting people in many different ways. For many, COVID-19 has represented yet another stone in their path. So, in the spirit of this year's Fintech Festival, people and talent, and with the central role of payments in financial inclusion, we ask all of those who vote to also choose an international charity to which you'd like to contribute. We have selected the 3 most voted charities to make a contribution to. So the chosen charities are Save the Children, UNICEF, Doctors Without Borders. CFTNB will make a donation to these 3 charities on all our behalf.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations to Ant Group, Infinite, the FCA, and Saray Chia for driving innovation in payment. For all those who voted for the winners, you also won a free course in the digital payment specialization, and you will be emailed all the details about it. Now, for the time that we still have together, we would like to open the session with Q&A between you and our speakers. Some of you have already been submitting your question in the Q&A box. This is wonderful. Continue to submit your questions in the systems, and the team will help to communicate them to me. So now let's start the Q&A. I would like to invite the senior lecturers to come on screen, and I will jump in the room behind.